guys think of the speech?
Oh, obviously, anytime that Donald Trump comes, and that was not scripted, guys. Let me tell you, we were back seeing the teleprompter. About 90% of that was just from his heart, and that's the great thing about this president, is he was speaking to the American people. A great speech.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. Last year was a darn good year. Taxes are lower, the economy is up, ISIS is backpedaling, the embassy has gone to Jerusalem, and Neil Gorsuch is on the Supreme Court, so a pretty darn good year. And the president talked about that. One of the things I always say to folks back in our district is I wish every single American could spend some time with the president, because when you do, you see how much he cares about this great country, our military, our law enforcement, hardworking people. He genuinely, you can feel it, and I think everyone here got to see a bit of that just a few minutes ago.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, conservatives, they have a lot of reasons to be excited right now. They have an ally in the White House. They control all three branches of government. But in the last year, Republicans failed to repeal Obamacare. Many of them voted for a budget deal that busted through the spending caps that conservatives fought to secure. And at least in the Senate, other immigration talks that would extend what could be characterized as amnesty to nearly 2 million people. So what is the argument that you would make to conservative voters to turn out in November to put more Republicans in Washington if these are the kinds of results you see?
Well, Sarah, I think it's going to take more Republicans that actually are willing to do what they promised the American people they would do when they campaigned. I mean, this place, Jim says it best, it never hurts to do what you told the American people you would do. But I think the other thing is we need to get back to work. 3 days a week in the Senate is not, well, in North Carolina, we call that a vacation. They call it a work week. It's time that we actually get some things done and go to 51 votes in the Senate. Enough of this 60-vote deal.
Well, yeah, I would say we got to campaign on what we have accomplished in 17, but there's more work that needs to be done. We've repealed the individual mandate in Obamacare, but there's more that we got to do to keep our word with the American people on that issue. And then, when it comes to immigration, we just, as Mark just said, we got to do what we told the American people we were going to do, what the mandate of the 2016 election was all about. And that is border security wall first, end chain migration, stop the visa lottery, get rid of sanctuary cities, do all those things. That's got to be the kind of immigration focus that we have. And the president's there, so let's just keep focusing on those things that we told them we were going to do. They gave us the privilege of going to serve them. Let's get those things done.
Well, let's talk about immigration, because we're getting closer and closer to that March 5th expiration date for DACA. You see talks in the Senate not really progressing with immigration. Why don't we see the House moving on any immigration talks?
Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I think we need to. Obviously, we've been very supportive of a more conservative bill in the House. That's generally the way that it should be. It's the people's House. It's closer to the people. Ours really emphasizes those things that Jim just was talking about, is ending chain migration, dealing with sanctuary cities, making sure that the rule of law is upheld. People don't realize right now, you could have someone come across our southern border. They can be apprehended by border security agent, and many of them get a free pass. What they do is they get a deferred adjudication, so they get a work permit, they get to come on in, and they are going to show up for before a judge later. So I think we need to go ahead and do that. I'm calling on our leadership. Jim and I have both called on our leadership to pass a conservative bill in the House, and then make the Senate come to us and the president, and if they really want to deal with it. I think that's what we need to do.
Do you think there's any bill, though, that could get only Republican support in the House but still somehow also meet that 60-vote threshold in the Senate?
I'm much more concerned about doing what the American people elect us to do than trying to satisfy some 60-vote threshold in the Senate. That's why Mark said earlier, we got to get rid of this 60-vote rule. It never hurts. I mean, I always say this. We make this job, and we've said it a couple times here, we make this job too complicated. What did you tell the people you were going to do when you ran for the job? What did they elect you to do, and what was the mandate of the 2016 election? It's very clear on immigration policy. It's not the Graham bill. It's not the Thune bill. It's the bill that Chairman Goodlatte has introduced in the House, which prioritizes things in the way, policies in the way I just described. Border security wall, chain migration, sanctuary city, visa lottery. You do all those, then the American people will say, okay, If we do that, now we're willing to deal with this DACA situation in that population, but it has to be done in that prioritizing fashion, or it's not consistent with the mandate of the election.
Chairman Meadows, you said that immigration is a defining moment for the speaker.
You were supposed to go with easy questions, not hard questions, yeah.
Do you think that he's rising to that moment right now?
Well, again, it is a defining moment. You know, when you have our leadership, and I use that plural, and it's not just the speaker or the leader, I mean, it's leadership in the House. At this particular point, what we've got to do is show real leadership. And if we cave, the American people will remember it. You'll remember it in November, and you know what? You should. You know, I'm tired of the talk. You know, it's time that we actually get things done. So that was my call on leadership, to actually make sure that we go ahead and put it on the floor and vote on it.
So obviously the national conversation is turning a lot to guns in the wake of the tragedy in Parkland. President Trump has been talking about this issue quite a bit, and Republicans seem maybe more open to the possibility of doing some sort of gun control compromise than any time in recent memory. What do you think of the direction the president is steering the conversation right now?
What I'm open to is what the president just talked about. That coach who gave his life for his students, if he was able to have a firearm there to protect himself, those kids that he gave his life for, the president spoke very clearly and very eloquently about that just a few minutes ago. Proper training. I mean, every single church that I know of has that same kind of policy. There are parishioners each Sunday who've had the training. Maybe they're retired law enforcement, retired military, as the president talked about. They have a policy in place. They have certain people who are carrying a concealed firearm to protect the folks who are at the service. I think that makes sense for schools too, and I think the president's been articulate about that in a way that no one else can be.
Yeah, and I think at this point that all of us are in the information gathering mode, but I can tell you that when you start to fundamentally look at removing our constitutional protected liberties, that's not a good starting place to go. You know, let's think about it. There were a whole lot of people that notified the Health and Human Services group in that particular area that this individual allegedly had some real trouble. That was a government agency. Then they notified the FBI that there were some problems. That was a government agency. Then we had a school resource officer that was there that didn't engage. That was a government agency. So we had 3 government agencies, and we still had this unbelievable tragedy. So to suggest that more government is the answer is not a good starting point.
So both of you have obviously performed a lot of congressional oversight in your roles on your various committees. There has been some congressional oversight of the FBI and the DOJ lately that critics have described as an effort to undermine the FBI, whether we're talking about the handling of the dossier, whether we're talking about texts between different FBI agents. What would you say to critics?
The only undermining has been of the Constitution of the United States. Look, all these folks know, Americans know, you can't have top people at the FBI take some salacious and unverified document, not my words, James Comey's words, dress it all up, pretend it's intelligence, take it to a secret court to get a warrant to spy on a fellow citizen. It does not work that way. And the problems aren't the rank and file FBI agents. The problems are the people at the top. Jim Comey is gone. Andrew McCabe just left this past week. Lisa Page has been reassigned, demoted and reassigned. Peter Strzok's been demoted and reassigned. Jim Rubicki, former chief of staff for Comey, is leaving the FBI, and Jim Baker, former chief counsel at the FBI, has been demoted and reassigned. That's where the problem is. So we're trying to get to the bottom of these and ask the kind of questions to get answers for the American people. And what needs to happen, something Mark and I called for 7 months ago, is a second special counsel. I don't like special counsels, but you need one to get to the bottom of this whole matter in a way that will give the good folks of this country the answers they deserve.
Yeah, and I think the other part of that is you know, this whole collusion narrative. You know, we've had months and months and months, probably more investigation into the collusion between this president and the Russians. And what we're finding is, you know, the narrative is starting to change. If there's collusion, it's not with Donald Trump and the Russians. By the way, how many of you got Russians to get you here today? I mean, you know, come on, let's face it when we're looking at what we're talking about. But I can tell you, if there's collusion to be found, and there's some evidence that would suggest that, it is really with the Hillary campaign and the Russians, not the other way around.
Senator Cotton asked a great question last week when FBI Director Wray was in front of the Senate. He asked Director Wray if he'd heard of the name Oleg Deripaska. Oleg Deripaska is a Russian oligarch, and he asked him about whether Christopher Steele, the guy who wrote the dossier, put the dossier together, was employed by Deripaska. And it was interesting, the FBI Director's response was, I can't talk about that in this setting, we'll have to talk about that later. So we don't know if that was the case, but think about this. If it was the case, the guy who put together the dossier was being paid for by Clinton for America, the Democrat National Committee, and maybe a Russian oligarch. That's scary if that in fact took place. So these are, again, the kind of things we have to get to the bottom of. That's why we're doing our oversight. More importantly, that's why we need a second special counsel.
Sarah, let me jump in on one thing, because we talked about gun control earlier. We talked about our law enforcement. Jim and I love our law enforcement. The vast majority of the FBI are wonderful, serving individuals who love the rule of law. But fundamentally, what happened in the White House just the last few days on this whole gun debate really is what distinguishes us as a nation. You think about it, if someone in China or some other place had a problem with the way that their government operated, they would push back. They would, say things. Actually, in another foreign area, you might be sent to jail. What happens in America, you get an invitation to the White House for an honest dialogue. That's what makes America great, and that's what we need to support.
So we're heading towards the midterms. President Trump himself just mentioned in his speech that there is the possibility that Republicans could get clobbered in November. Many of your colleagues
I don't think so.
are choosing not to run again, perhaps out of fear that they could soon be in the minority. Do you think that's the reason why we're seeing a historic number of Republicans step down?
Look, I think it could be a fine year for Republicans. I just talked about the first year of President Trump's administration, the good things that got done. So we just have to go out and keep campaigning hard. This year we got to work on doing what we told the voters we're going to do. The press is never going to say it's good for us. I mean, the press is other than Sarah, right? Everyone else is going to. But Mark and I tell our colleagues all the time, look, if the press isn't saying something bad about you, you're probably not doing anything any good. So we understand that's sort of the lay of the land. But we just got to go out and take the message to the American people, talk about those tax cuts, talk about the progress we're making, and continue to do good things this year.
Well, and I think it depends on all the people that are here. I mean, the truth of the matter is it's the voice of the people that actually make the biggest difference. And if the people that are here, that next generation, a lot of the young folks that come, the next generation of conservatives, if they truly show up and they get engaged and they actually support conservatives, we found that conservative policy actually, well, it puts more crumbs back in your pocket. I can tell you, I've got a $100 crumb here, and it's all about making sure that conservative policy works.
Well, speaking of that, if the midterms don't go well, do you think that would suggest a need for a change in Republican leadership in Congress, maybe a push from House Freedom Caucus members such as yourselves? Would you have designs on leadership if the midterms don't go well?
We've never been afraid of pushing, but we think the midterms are going to go well for our part.
Really right now, I'm not as worried about who the Speaker of the House is as I am about the House leading. And the truth of the matter is, you need to make sure that if your member of Congress doesn't see the light, they need to feel the heat. And get on those phones, make sure that they do that. God bless you. It's great and I believe you're doing it. Thank you. God bless you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Thanks. It's great to be with you.